He likes to just live alone and write.
It's international, and who was implementing these nonviolent methods and tactics to protect people and communities in Latin America and in other parts of the world. Of course, I started to study a subject in Latin America and not in other parts of the world, because I could speak Spanish. That was very relevant in order to get information and to have access to sources. I couldn't do that in other conflict areas. So I started to do this in Mexico, and I visit Mexico. I visit later Colombia and Guatemala, and yeah. And after my PhD, I continued doing this kind of research. I was interested in how civil society was able to produce some tools and some mechanisms to contribute to protect people and to transform conflicts in nonviolent ways. So I keep doing that, but I expanded my scope of interest to to Palestine, because I started to work in a university in Coventry in UK, in Coventry University, and there we had a project with Palestinian University, the Arab American University at that time was based in Jenin, and we and I started to also to check how the civil society organizations were able to protect people also in Palestine, and trying to compare the cases of Colombia and Palestine to see how this worked there. And yeah, so I visit also Palestine several times. Later I moved to Nablus, and I was living in Nablus and working in Al-Najah also for a period. And I keep continuing working on these issues. So yeah, this is my experience working in these places with different local partners, usually universities, which open me the door to collaborate with them and conduct researches on the field in Colombia, in Mexico, and in Palestine, also in South Africa. And yeah, so all the next things that I'm going to talk are based in this personal experience, very particular and very linked to my personal history. So, and my research in Colombia started in 2006, Mexico in 2005, and in Palestine it was in 2011. Since those dates, I came back to this territory several times, and yeah, I was more or less maintaining my research interest too, and trying to update some things in there. So the first thing that I learned when I was initiating my field research in Mexico, actually, it was the relevance that have all the preparations before actually the field research start. Of course, we need all these things and all the logistics related with the journey and the traveling, with the plane tickets, the accommodation, also the insurance, these kind of things. But for me, it was more relevant and unexpected, the idea of how to reach the field. In fact, because, well, you travel to Mexico or you travel to Palestine from Europe, you have read many things, but in fact you have not checked how is that working in reality, and you don't know anything on those countries. You don't know basic things on how things work in those countries. So yeah, it is basic to have help and guide once you reach your area of research. So it is important to have people who introduce you to what is going on there, to advise you on how to behave in different situations. And also, most important for your research, it is the people who you need to approach in order to develop your research there. It could be, it is important to have people to guide you in the process, to find the people in charge of giving you the administrative permissions. This is something very bureaucratic, but something that you have to do there. Or and it is even more important if you are doing social science research, and you are going to collect interviews. I mean, you are going to do interviews, and you are going to have people to inform you. You need to contact them. You need to know who to approach. And for that, yeah, I think it is basic that yeah, you have people or you find people to guide you in this. Usually journalists, I think one of you were a journalist. You know that journalists, when they have to travel to other countries and start to do their work, they have these local people to support them in the process. So for researchers, this is something that we sometimes we don't know, or probably in many cases we ignore, and it is something yeah, basic. It is basic, especially in order to yeah, get introduced into a new country, new society, new people, new behaviors, new culture, but also someone who help you to identify the key informants for your research. You could have a general idea, but then you have to identify the right people in the right moment. This is something basic. And for this, in order to get all those all that access to the informants and to the territory, it is important to understand that you are an intruder there. You are an external actor to that territory, to those communities, to those organizations, and this means several things. One is that they don't know you. One is that the things that you do there, it may affect them too. So you have to be careful, and you need time. You need time to present yourself to the communities, to the people, to the organizations. This is usually relevant, but even more relevant in the when you conduct field work in the context of armed conflicts, because the trust is more precious, or I mean, with all the violence ongoing, and people are reluctant to trust in new people that they are just meeting. So they could have or they could imagine that you have a kind of hidden agendas, or you are working for the opponents, or whatever. So yeah, you need time to build that trust with the local actors. You need time to create those relations that allow you to meet with the communities and with the local actors, and to let them open to you and open to share their testimony for your research. And for this, it's basic that people understand who you are. They need to understand who you are. What do you want from them? What are you doing? And how what you are doing is going to affect them. This is something that sometimes we do not reflect enough on that. And for me, it was basic to understand and to relax. I mean, sometimes we are under the pressure of time. We need like 1 month to conduct our research. We have a limited resources of funding for accommodation, for traveling. So we have to do our research in a particular period, a very short period of time, and well, we need to get rid of those of that pressure and understand that these kind of things in sensible environments take time, and take time to build this trust. So this was one of the most difficult things to learn for me, probably when I was in the field, doing my field work. And yeah, it is very, I mean, we have to invest time on this, because if the communities and the local actors trust you, this is going to facilitate how they share information with you, how they provide you the testimonies, because at the end, this is very, they are sharing private or sensitive information with you. They are sharing personal data, testimonies, and at the end, many part of this information, part of this data that they are sharing with you, it could generate a security risk, or for them it could be a security risk for them if that information ends in the wrong hands. So it is common. I remember when I was in Colombia, for instance, and I wanted to meet with some organizations working with prisoners, and they had already received direct threats from paramilitary groups and for their work in Medellin, for instance. And when I approached them, they were very reluctant to talk with me. I had to contact them. I tried first to contact them personally. They were reluctant to talk to me in that way, so I asked some other people I knew in Medellin to intercede and to present me to them in order to facilitate the access to this group and their office, and to establish these meetings and interviews, to know how what were they doing, and also how were they receiving or perceiving the protection from this other civil organization that I was studying, civil society organization. So yeah, I noticed it. What?
Dr. Diego?
Yeah.
First of all, thank you so much for mentioning all this. I mean, the contract of research, I mean, pre-stage of the research, which is like how to build trust, and then research ethics and so on. And my question is that how to build trust and without even violating the ethics, because sometimes in some cases in which the intervention is needed, and you have to distribute parts, I mean conflicting parts, and then you need to build the trust without violating the ethics. I mean, you have to display the reality, I mean your reality and the objective of your research. How you can build trust without even violating, I mean, the norm, research norm. I mean, I'm talking about ethics. I'm again give you just example of my research. I'm proposing working on a research, I mean, investigating the effects of civic engagement on Moroccan reconciliation, I mean, between the Western Sahara and Morocco. And there is an intervention, and you're gonna get people intervene and take action. I mean, civic projects and so on. And you try to study the effects of these actions on reconciliation, I mean, socially and politically. So, and on that context, there are people who are against, they are against, self-autonomy, I mean, and there's the sovereignty of Morocco. How you could, you could get them involved, and you can try, you can make them get their trust without even violating the norm. I mean, displaying the reality as it is. I mean, as an activist, as a research who are trying civic engagement as an approach to what they don't want. I mean, reconciliation. We work on a reconciliation between the West and the North, and so on. So that's my question. Thank you so much.
Yeah, good question. It is difficult, but I think that in some cases, I mean, to build trust, you need to take part in the activities of the organizations, but in other cases you don't. It depends on the context. For instance, in Colombia, most of them, or in Mexico, most of my research was non-participant. So I was there, I was listening, I was accompany them, but I didn't participate in their activities directly, or I didn't give my opinions or whatever. So I was just there as a witness. However, in Palestine, it was a little different, because I took part in some actions, and I had more participation in the activities developed by the organizations I was researching. So it depends on the case. You have to adapt your research, and my personal take in this case was that in those places where I was, it was not needed my participation in order to get trust. I didn't have to intervene in any way. I was a researcher, and in my case, the ones, the actors and the leading force of all their activities were the local organizations, and I was there just recording. And in other cases, to get that trust, you need to participate with them. But even if you don't take part in their actions, for instance, sharing food with people, sharing time, sharing a coffee, sharing a tea, talking with people, and being quite open and frank on your research, the purpose of your research, and also explaining them. Even your political position is not, it should not be a problem to be open with that. And I think that this is the way to build trust, to be open, honest. I think that's also important, to be honest in your research, and it should not affect negatively to the ethics of your research. In other cases, if you take part in or if you intervene with them in activities and so on, I mean, this could have some ethical problems. It is true, but I think it should not be problematic either, because if you state in your thesis or in your results, in the results of your research, and you are honest, and you explain how you conduct the research, and what has been the methodology used, and you position yourself there, it should not be a problem either. Once it is clear your position and you explain openly what you have done. So it depends on every context. In my case, I had both cases. One with non-participant research, and other where my fieldwork involved more participant action on that. In both cases, it allowed me to get enough trust to be able to have access to my informants, and to provide information to my research.
So Abdulghani wants to ask a question. He raised his hand. Abdulghani, you can ask Abdulghani.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Can you hear me well now?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Professor, for your real life experience. It's so important for us as novice PhD researchers. Concerning at one point, concerning trust. Now you talked about the trust that you build with the people you are working with. I'm asking about the other, on the other hand, the other trust. How can I trust the historical resources, authentic historical resources, and avoid the misleading ones in relation to your field as a history, or in history, your studies and experience is very great in history. Thank you.
You need to be critical with the sources, with all sources. You need to be critical with the testimony that you receive in interviews, irrespective of who provides you with the testimony. It could be an official source belonging to the government or the authorities, or it could be someone that represents an NGO or someone from the community, whatever. You need to be critic with that, because they are giving you some information, and they could have different perspective on the issue, or they could have different purposes to give you some information. So you have to be critical with all the information that you receive, and also with historical sources. Historical sources, archives, and so on, they have been collected in particular ways, and you have to learn to read them with that critical perspective. Still, they are very useful. They could try to hide things, but also they have senses of things that should be in the sources and they are not. This is telling you also something about the purpose of the source, and how they are building, or they are trying to build the history or the narrative. So yeah, I think that your concern is what? Okay, your concern.
Sorry.
Sorry.
I thought that you finished.
No, I was trying to finish with this, that your concern is important. I mean, and you have to be cautious about that, but you have to be cautious about every single source. Okay, this critical analysis have to apply to any source, not only to the historical ones.
The structural ego in this case, what is my concern as a researcher?
What is
Am I going to check what is my concern as a researcher? What is my objective or my job as a researcher? Is it to check the validity and truthfulness of the resources, I mean the data, or just to deal with the data? Because from my experience, because I'm novice, I'm just like fresh researcher. So what we did is that to collect data and to deal with the data. My role is not to check the validity and truthfulness of this resource, but to just analyze it as it is. I got the resources, I got the data from the respondents, and that's it. And then the next step, I analyze, interpret the data they given to me. It's not to check after them. It's not to look whether they provided me with the real, real data or not. This is
yeah. But you have to know that every testimony or every document or whatever, it is created with a purpose. I mean, there is a history behind every data that we collect. So here probably a way to balance or to weight the information is to use different sources. I mean, you can use official archives, and you are going to have an information there. And you can also go to for other private archives that are going to give you other information. You can also, if you are researching a contemporary issue, you can also make interviews to different people to receive different perspective on the issue. So the idea is to have multiple sources of information in order to have a plural vision and trying to build your research on that. I think is a way to avoid that problem on the if you can trust in the sources.
The one thing I can add, actually, Professor, that in research you have somewhat we call a validity procedure. And one of the validity procedure to validate your own resources first, to validate the resources. So when you have a resource, you need to validate the resource, and to validate validation procedure, which will validate the resources, validate the process that you are doing, and validate the outcome of your research. The validation process is very important part of the analysis. So if validation sometimes comes, it's very difficult to do because you need another researcher to be with you and to tell you what you have done, to check another person to check the resources that you have given, and he will give you the validity of your own. This is part of how it works. So there's like a process in the methodology that you need the validation before you, after you conduct your research, and then you have to do a validation process, and it's you have to check it out. Actually, we can give you how to develop the methodology research much more. Thank you. I just wanted to add this.
Any other question?
Just saying, yeah, Dr. Diego.
Yeah.
Just what I noticed is that we are talking about two different things. I mean, I think, and then I want Abdelghani to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what Abdelghani meant is that, I mean, he talked about the resources that you can get. I mean, the data that you can get from the respondents. And it's not, I mean, the resource, I mean, the literature review, because we cannot ask in the literature review, we present everything, we display everything, we write about everything. I mean, the two conflict ideas and thoughts, and then we can solve the problem by relying on different resources that could bring, I mean, two different in the reality. But I think that he meant, I mean, the data, the collected data from the respondents.
Yeah. Maybe got disconnected. There's a low internet as it seems in my after that as a low internet. So Zinat, I can ask a question. Zinat?
Yeah, I want to talk about the informants themselves and the trust. Sometimes they are bored and tired because of the lots of researches, and they believe that these researchers can serve their issues, their cause. But sometimes, you know, as a PhD or as a researcher, you are going to have a project and your own goal, not their own goals. So how can we handle this issue? Because it's really important and difficult issues also in the field work.
Yeah, I mean, first is you have to be honest, explaining what you are doing and what is your purpose, and then you need, and this is part of the advantages of the area of studies that you are doing here in the reconciliation studies, in peace studies. One of the purposes of our research is to have a social impact, to transform the reality. So in our case, we have to try, and we need to try to find a way to impact that reality that we are analyzing. It could be just providing the, I don't know, maybe a report for the political, for a policy paper for trying to impact the political decisions or the policymakers at some stage. Or we could also trying to develop particular list of guidelines to change something, whatever. The idea is to find the way to offer them something, offer them not only to the informants, also to a particular thing that is going to have an impact, or research is going to have an impact on that issue if we want to change something. So that is something that you can explain to your informants, saying that this is going to be useful for your community because my report is going to reach you whatever, or because we are trying to implement a new program or something, or we want to create whatever, and this could be useful for you. Another way that you can also it can also help you with this is to trying to get back later when your research is finished, to try to explain what did you find, and trying to share with them physically in their communities what you have reached. So in that way, they are seeing that your collection of your data collection it was not an extractive process. It's something that is going to be also benefiting the community. At least they are understanding what is going on and the result of your research. So yeah, but it is our task to find a way that how can we translate our research into something meaningful for the communities, and we have to explain them. So it is something that we have to think in advance. You are right. In that way, they will be also more open to share the information and to discuss with us.
I would like just to add one thing, actually, that the validation that we do in research, you have to validate your own themes. So you go into like the themes and then coding, and then you validate, and then you interpret. So there's like the 4 validation process of research. You have a theme, and then you code those themes, and then you interpret, you study those themes, you go to validate, and then you do interpretation. You take them in step by step. Within this process, you can understand where the error is happening. And once you discover the error, explore the error, you can also explore that the resources that you are depending on are not good resources or biased resources. So biased resources, you will discover it within your research. Then you can know that the research is not heading in the right way and the right resource because of the resources, or because like it's a process. So it's a process of steps, and those steps you have to take them very cautious. So you have your theme, and you code your theme. When I say coding, it's like dividing the themes of your outcome into codes of what your research question is, the hypothesis. And then you go into the validation process of the hypothesis and the themes and the coding. And then you interpret. If the interpretation is getting away from each other and you're not getting the essence of what you're working on, means that the resources are biased or not sufficient. So then you have to go back again in a loop to check where the error happened. And in that stage, you can discover that the error is either are in the themes that you supported, or the hypothesis is not correct, or the hypothesis is wrong, or you did not get it, or the coding that you did is not efficient, or the validation, it was not correct. And it will discover, and part of the research that you do discovers where the problem is. So sometimes it's the resources, sometimes it's the theme, sometimes it's the coding, the way you interpret things. So as a researcher as well, I don't want to take more of Professor Diego, is also the trust issues within the community is talking about, because you have to go into the ethical consideration. So I don't want to go there until Professor Diego talks about it. So they're all connected together. Thank you.
Dr. Yad, can I explain my idea, because it seems that I was misunderstood. My main question is, how can I make? Is there a way to make sure that the resources that I get, for example, are authentic one or not misleading? Because as you know, there are conflicting resources. Like some people say that we are victim, and the other party says that we are victim. How can I make sure that the resources are historical ones, particularly religious and political? Because there are a lot of fake historical resources. So this is my main question. It's not about the data that I'm analyzing. Thank you also for answering the academic way, but I'm talking about historical resources concerning religious and political ones. Is there a way just to make sure that this resource is authentic one, to take the information and data from it or not? That's my question. Thank you so much.
Yeah. The best way to check that is considering sources that have been already validated, sources that historians are using. This is the first way to see if some historical sources are, let's say, are sources that you can trust or not. But again, historical sources are product of humans, are writing documents, and those documents that people write, they are showing different things. One could be administrative data. These are the best things to have because they are quite I mean, they are usually what you said true, because this is something very or at least it should not bring any dispute. So it's just a recording of something very very clear, very precise, and they are collecting that information. So all the administrative information, it should not bring any problem. But there are other historical sources. For instance, imagine a collection of letters of someone. These letters or the documents written by someone is just his opinion on something. So yeah, depending on the archive that you are visiting and the historical sources that you are analyzing, especially the written documents, all of them are sources. All of them are sources that you can use. Okay, and the problem is yeah, the purpose that is behind of some of these documents. Who is the authority who create them? Because the authority that create those documents have also a goal, and it has an opinion on things, it has a view of things, and this is reflected in the documents. So there is no historical source out of these problems. So and you can have both valid historical sources, two historical sources that are, let's say, true and right, and they could have very different information about the same issue. Okay, so this is something. Yeah.
I'm sorry for keeping asking question. I'm just like trying to learn and trying to understand. To my mind, that as a researcher, we are not an inspector, so I'm not going to inspect whether the resource that's given to me as a researcher is right or wrong. Even it could be done later and the later stage, because as a researcher, I have something to start with. I started with a hypothesis that I built through, the review of the literature. So before getting involved or indulged in the research, in the field research, I have review of literature. Via that review of literature, I developed my hypothesis that I need to confirm or disconfirm. When it's confirmed, so it's done. When it's not confirmed, like what I had in the review of the literature, as a researcher, I may be on the lookup for an explanation. On that stage, for example, I will suspect whether the respondents or the informants have given me the real data or not, whether they give me a fake data or not. But before, I cannot, because a researcher, I need to be, let's say, it's not objective, but I try to be objective. And if I suspect the data, a resource that I get from the respondents, means I'm not objective, because they have pre ideas. I started with a confirmed hypothesis, and this is not, to my mind, it's not a research, because I start like from tabula rasa, nothing in mind except the data that I have in my review of the literature that I'm going to confirm or disconfirm. But if I started suspecting whether the respondents gave me true ideas, so it's not. That's to my mind, and so sorry for.
It is true. But we have to. But this is also something that we need to stress, that the sources, there is no right or wrong sources.
Exactly.
This is important. There is
Absolutely.
no real historical sources and fake historical
Yeah.
sources.
Absolutely.
Historical sources are what they are, and they provide you with some data, and you need to interpret them. Okay, this is our task here, and yeah, this is the task. The task for any of us is to understand why we have this different information, why some people confirm these ideas, the others are contradicting that, and we need to find explanations to that. Yeah. So, but it is interesting because many people think, as you mentioned before, that historical sources should be clear, real, and we can read them. Now, yeah, we can read them, and what we read in the historical sources should be the history, and that is not true. That is not true. We build history through different interpretation over different and sometimes contradictory sources. Okay, so let me continue to the second challenge for, in my case, for field work in the conflict areas, which was risks. And for nobody told me before I experimented in the field that when you conduct research in conflict zones, it is very, very relevant to analyze continuously how is evolving the conflicts, how is evolving the situation on the field. Because it is true that in those areas with direct violence environments and things happening, the situation sometimes is quite volatile, especially in local areas. So there are dynamics that change quickly, and you find there in the middle working, and suddenly things happens and you are there. So you need to prevent to be surprised and to have a plan to adapt yourself in order to continue your research and also to remain safe. And once I was in Palestine in 2014. Yeah, 2014, and it was in May. The situation in the West Bank during the first half of the year was calm, not very tough at that time, but suddenly something happened there, and it's that some Palestinians, well, it was supposed that some settlers were kidnapped by Palestinians, and the Israeli authorities and the occupation forces started to look for them. They got mad and they started to look for them in the whole West Bank. So imagine a lot of soldiers in the streets, in the roads, more checkpoints than usual, more checks, and again all the soldiers in the cities, in the towns, and well, and this happened there. And I remember how I came back to Nablus like other times, and when I enter into Nablus, there is at the entrance of the city in the main road, you find one of the more politically active refugee camps. Balata camp is there, and the Shabab there, they decided to stop every single car entering into the city to check if Israel were inside. So I came back. It was like a middle night, coming back in a taxi from Ramallah, and yeah, and we were stopped in that checkpoint. So thanks, the guy who was driving the taxi was a local person from Nablus, and he interceded, because of course these people didn't know us. They saw that we were foreigners. They didn't know and they didn't trust on us due to that situation. And it was a very tense and very stressful situation, because these people were just yeah, burning things in the middle of the street and just dropping or launching the rocks against the cars and this kind of thing. So this was an example of something that it was something happened, an event happened there, and in one day everything changed. All the situation changed, and in a normal activity or action that I had implemented during the previous weeks, regularly visiting Ramallah, coming back to Nablus, and at some point, yeah, something that happened there affects you, and it could have severe consequences. In other case, visiting Quibdó in well, the Chocó in Colombia, I entered into well, I visited a town there in Rio Sucio, and it was a more or less remote area. I had to access by ship to that region. I was doing interviews to people supporting the return of some forced displaced people from that area. They wanted to came back to their territories, but the paramilitary groups tried to prevent the return of these people to their lands. So I went there to make some interviews on that issue to Rio Sucio. Just a few days after I visited the Rio Sucio, the paramilitary groups kidnapped 50 people there because they wanted to put pressure to avoid the return of these displaced people to the territory. So I mean, there are events sometimes that it could affect the development of your research, and these events are more serious when you are conducting research in these spaces, spaces where there is an ongoing war, or where there is military occupation, or where you have paramilitary groups acting in the open space. So to avoid the consequences of finding you in a bad situation, it is important, and it is very necessary, that you adapt your research, and you also assess the risk situation that you have to face during your research. So you have to be ready to modify your, for instance, your mobility, the way that you move in the territory. You need to be able to modify the appointments that you have, or to change routes or changing times. But also you may change what activities can you still continue doing, or what activities you should try to avoid. And it's not only for your own security, it's also for the security of your informants and the people who are supporting you in the research. And at some point you need to decide two things. One is what research activities can be implemented in a safe way, and the other is what risk level you are going to affect. These are two questions that probably everybody is going to be a different answer, but these are questions that we fundamentally need to ask when you are working in this environment. So at first, it is something that we all do when we are going to do a field research. We do this literature review, and if you are going to visit another country, or you are going to do this research in a particular context, you read a lot, not only about the subject of your research, but you also read about the country, about the society, in order to get an image of that. So you try to make a general analysis to get the big picture of the context where your object of study is located. In that way, you are going to understand the general dynamics in the conflict, in the region, more or less. But then you need to keep doing that analysis, and it is needed in this context to develop continuous situation analysis. You need to try to guess how is the current picture every time, every day, or every 2 days. You need to know what is going on, what did change from the previous time or 2 days ago to now, because this is a way to protect your research, and also to protect your own life sometimes. And it is important to pay attention to all those immediate dynamics affecting especially to the local area where you are conducting your research. This is fundamental. And for that is needed the analysis of a huge amount of information, general information from media, or more specific information on the situation, and coming from media, civil society, authorities, international and governmental organizations, everything, all the information that you can get in order to have an idea of what is going on. And this is something that you have to do regularly in order to be to try to also to advance those changes that could happen and affect you in the field. And in that way, with all that information that you are gathering, you need to analyze and assess how the actors are behaving, what are their perception, if they are changing something that from before, and how are evolving the dynamics and the conflicts there, and if a particular event that happened could affect the situation. So yeah, you need to understand how is going on all these things. And this lets you to, for instance, to understand if you are going to assume too much risk traveling to a particular area, that maybe it happened something the day before, and those events happening there could develop further violence in that municipality or in that city one day. So maybe it is better for you to avoid visiting that place until things are getting calmer, for instance. There are many examples of this situation. In places like West Bank and Palestine, you have, for instance, the international governmental organization that provides some information on the evolution of the situation. They share it with the partners that they have in the field, but it's easy to have access to that information, for instance. And you can also have access to your own partners in the territory to give you information, updated information of what is going on. You can also check the local media, and if you have contact with local authorities, this is also a source of information useful for assess how is the situation and the risk that could come after any change. It is important not only for your own and personal security or the others, but also it's important to organize and to implement your research. It is, I mean, if you are going to visit a place and you don't have access because there is a closure on that area because something happened the day before, then you are losing time and money due to the transport and due to the accommodation of one day more in the territory that you are not using for your research, because you cannot implement your research there because now is, for instance, the space is closed. Or or you expect to have meetings with people, and these people is not going to be able to attend because there are other worries at that time. So in order to plan your own research and to use better your resources, it's also advisable to develop and implement this kind of risk assessments, not only for your personal security, let's say, safety. In my case, beyond all the violence that could happen in the different contexts, one of the most risky activities in the field is drinking water. Drinking water is a very risky activity because it's that water that you drink. It has, I mean, it's not drinkable. You can suffer many different diseases, and if you suffer a disease in the field, this is going to make more difficult to continue your research. Maybe you have to be at home in bed some days, or maybe you cannot escape from a bathroom for 1 or 2 days, and this is going to make more difficult to continue your research, and this is going to have a financial impact also in your research. You are consuming resources without results. And it happens the same with food. These are things that for Europeans sometimes we need or experimented in the field, and then we will remember always in the future. Or we need someone with experience that advises us, well, don't drink water at least until you get used to that, or you don't eat food for instance, in the street because you don't know how it has been cooked or whatever, and it could make you a little bit sick. But beyond that, probably the other major risk that we are facing in fieldwork, and it is the risk of or generated by the mobility, by the movement, by traveling, especially traffic and traffic accidents. If we are doing the research in the field, we need to move from different areas, and usually in this context where there is a situation of violence, or there were wars or whatever, communications are not in good conditions in many cases, or they have trouble. So in some cases this could lead to traffic accidents, or even for instance, I remember once the first time that I visited Colombia in 2006, it was very, very frequent to avoid traveling out of the big cities in Colombia if you were foreigner, because you had a serious risk of being kidnapped. So to avoid that checkpoint called search for you at some places and kidnap you in the middle of the street, you were advised to travel by plane to the rural areas or some areas in the periphery of Colombia. And of course, they also advise you to avoid traveling by night, because the security it could be there were more risk for your security. These things happen, well, those of you who already know Palestine, you know how difficult could be to cross a checkpoint in Palestine for everybody. I remember the first time that I visited Palestine in 2012. I was with a colleague of mine who was a professor in the University of Coventry, another one who was professor in a Belgian university, 2 Europeans. And it came with us also a Palestinian lecturer who used to work with us in Coventry. And he was our guide in Palestine in this first trip. He is from Fahum in the 48. And we were lucky because he was able to speak Arabic and Hebrew. So I remember we were exiting from Jenin in the north to Galilee, and the checkpoint was closed until, I don't know, 12 or something like that. So we have to wait in the middle of the road for 2 hours until these people opened the checkpoint. And it was I don't know, it was winter, but it's a very hot day. So we went outside of the car, and immediately someone in the tower of the checkpoint started to shoot us. I mean, he was talking, he was claiming something we didn't understand, and our colleague quickly came and said, well, get inside the car again, because this guy is saying that if you don't enter into the car in 3 seconds, he is going to start to shoot you. because he wanted that everybody remains inside the car. But we couldn't understand him. I mean, my colleagues from Belgium, from England, or myself, we didn't speak Hebrew. So yeah, this thing happens even for foreigners. Imagine every time that the Palestinians wanted to cross those checkpoints and the behavior that they suffer. And also it happens something funny. Another time, this was in Calandia, crossing from Ramallah to East Jerusalem. And I remember that I was in a bus from Ramallah. And yeah, when you arrive to Calandia, there is this soldier that enters into the bus and asks for the documentation, checking that everybody has permit to enter into East Jerusalem. And I remember Palestinian old guy sitting next to me. When the soldier came, he presented all they are very polite with foreigners sometimes, and this guy gave me the welcome to Israel. So the Palestinian guy sitting next to me started to say, well, you have to tell him that this is not Palestine. This is not Israel, it's Palestine, in this way. And I was in between both. I knew that I understood that the Palestinian was right, but I couldn't afford myself to contradict the opinion of the Israeli soldier in front of me, because he was the guy in charge of allowing me getting inside the Jerusalem city or not. And I had a meeting there and I have interviews to do in this Jerusalem. So you see yourself sometimes in these contradictions and in these dilemmas time to time, and sometimes the population around you puts you in that situation. But of course, we are privileged people. I was a privileged people at that time. I knew that nothing serious could happen to me in that context. The only thing was that I could not conduct my interviews in Jerusalem. That was not too much for me. But still, when I told you, when you have to implement your research, you have your resources, and you have your time, you need to try to do the best and to overcome all the situations that arise in order to continue your research. Do you have any question on the issue of risks and assessment?
What happens when you get into this situation? What do you suggest to do when you are in a risk situation? What happens to the researcher when he has a problem with a soldier because of it, or maybe his research people don't want it, or they attack him, beat him up, and what would happen if the risk is in jeopardy? Is that kind of the ethical consideration that we can take, that the research cannot be done maybe, or it's biased, or what do you think?
My personal take here is that the risk assessment should guide you in the response that you have to do in front of the risk, because it depends of who you are, who are the actors that are committing any violent action, and it depending of the context. So to have to understand what is going on and the response that you could do, it should be based in the risk assessment that you have made before. This is the reason, because you need to do the assessment and to analyze what are the risks, because this could inform the response that you have to do in those situations. In my case, it's easy, and if I have time, I'm not in a hurry. I could start to discuss with the soldiers, or I could sometimes in the checkpoints you can take it in a different way. If you are in a hurry and you need to meet people in the other side, you are going to accept whatever they are doing in order to cross. I mean, this is in my personal experience. So in other cases, when I have to enter, for instance, in Israel, in the airport, and they conduct you also this research on you to see if they allow you to enter, I don't mind much because I just try to explain them what I'm going to do without sharing any personal information of my informants or my contacts. I try to reduce that to the minimum. But I can do it because I know that the only risk for me is that I am just denied the entry into Israel. Other people are not so lucky and they have family there, have to visit or whatever. So I mean, I understand yet that you have other limitations different than me when you go to Palestine or Israel and you have to do academic activities or research there. So yeah, it is different for everybody. And but also even in other contexts. So in Mexico, for instance, it was very interesting how when I was there doing research on the human rights issues and human rights protection and these things, the state of Mexico used to criminalize civil society organizations supporting human rights organizations. So people who were conducting research on that, we were suspicious. We were people that were suspicious. And knowing this was important because once, for instance, I came back from Chiapas in the south of Mexico, and I was by bus coming back to Mexico City. It's a long journey by bus, but I remember that in the middle of the night, at some point, and the bus stopped, and the bus was full of, well, half of the, no, it was full of people, of foreigners, tourists that they had been visiting the Chiapas for partying, visiting the area, and it was full of tourists. Most of them blondie people from Canada, from the US. And I was one of the few people who were just like a black hair, and we could be more similar to Mexican than the rest of the bus. And but in the bus came police officer from I don't remember the department, and he just entered into the bus and he went directly to me and asked me the papers and asked me my passport. And it was interesting because it was a way in which the security of Mexico told me, well, we are aware of what you are doing, and now you know that we know what you are doing here. So they didn't do anything against me or whatever, but it was a way to let me know that they were surveilling what I was doing there. And yeah, but it is interesting how these things affect you, because if you are not aware of the situation, and if you are not aware of that you could be you could be being watched by the authorities, this is a very scary situation, and maybe at the next day you depart from the country and you don't want to be in the middle of the situation, coming from Europe where you don't have such a kind of problems, or we used not to have those problems before. So yeah, these things affect your research in different ways. So the best thing is to be ready to be prepared to this kind of things happens, and when they happens, trying to use all the tools and all the information that you have collected in order to respond to those situations. But it is something that you have, it is tailor-made. You cannot provide with general responses for that. It depends on the context, and it depends also of who is the researcher involved in the situation and the moment. Well, tell me.
Actually, maybe we can take his question and then we can make a maybe 10 minutes break after his question. What do you think, Professor Diego? To drink a coffee and break?
This is a question for me?
That's a question for me, for Amir Ali, and a question for you. Yes.
Okay.
So, I will take the question and then maybe we can go to the break actually. And,
Thank you, Dr. Diego. Just you have mentioned the difficulties that we may face when we collect data, and there are risks that we may face when we collect data, especially in spoil and volatile situation of conflict. So what can you recommend us when we collect data? We should have to aware the minor and major risks that can be faced in social services or traffic or any problem. So how can we be fast and order the process of collecting data? We may collect data, or how can we make ready ourselves to awareing or considering those problems? What kind of order or procedures should we follow in order to collect those data and to finish or to complete our tasks of collecting data within a short period or within the time that we need to collect the data? This is my question. Thank you very much, Doctor.
You're welcome. And for me, it's, the most useful thing is to have a network of people that could provide you with information, to have people as resources to inform you. Because when you detect that there is a problem in the road and you don't have access to this or that town, local people is the best source of information to how to overcome those situations. They know the roads, they know the services that they have. So you have to trust in a kind of a local network of people that you have built during your research, and or if you are fortunate even before. And this is the best way to find those minor or these solutions to the different risks that could arise and threat some of your activities or your research. This is one part. So all the information that you collect should give you or should provide you with the tools enough to overcome those risks. Okay, it's the way. I mean, if I visit a place in Mexico, for instance, and I will try not only to know the main way to move from one place to the other, but I will have to try to find at least one or two other means of transport in order to, if one fail, I have other options to move. And if I don't know, if there is a risk that you could have problems for accessing to a territory under the control of an armed actor, then you have to assess if that risk is worthwhile. And if it's worthwhile, you have to try to reach people in the other side, or to reach people that could introduce you to the others to minimize the risks over you. So the idea is that you could be, as a researcher, a neutral actor in the conflict. You are not affecting the conflict. So you have to present yourself as that external actor, and someone that it is not affecting the development of the conflict. If you want to have access to different or to territories that are under the control of other factions, you need to provide them with the information about your neutrality on the conflict, even if you have your particular political view on the issues. But yeah, if you want to conduct that research and for you it's needed to be there, you need to negotiate with the local groups controlling the access to those territories, or you need to find ways to enter. And yeah, the way to do it is, in this case, is presenting yourself as a non-participating actor. So this is also connected with the previous question in the other challenge, and in the other challenge when we were talking about the participation or not in the as the development of research participation, or no, how was that? Yeah, in the activities of the organizations that you are researching, if you intervene and you participate in them and so on, if you do that, this is going probably to side you, or the others are going to side you in one or in one side of the conflict, and you are going to have more problems to access to the other side if you want to or if you have to do it. So we have to be cautious about these issues and to take them into consideration.
Thank you, Professor.
Okay.
Understand, you can ask your question, and then we can go out for a break for 10 minutes.
Fine.
Okay, thank you so much, Doctor. Just my question is that in what stage of research we can do risk assessment? Is it priority to our indulgement? I mean, to our field research, our intervention, or it's done during, I mean, when I get to the context and they found some difficulties and some risks that I need to deal with?
And you have to do it first before arriving to the field. You need to do this part of the risk assessment, like a general analysis, and get the big picture. And then once that you are in the field, you have to start to do this situation analysis almost every day, or every 2 or 3 days. You need to see how the situation is evolving and how it could affect you and your research in the territory. So you have to do a previous effort before getting into the field, but also a continuous effort later to continuous analyzing the risk that you faced on the territory.
So it's a kind of reflection, continuous reflection on what's going on. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Abdulrazak. Thank you, Professor Diego. What do you think? We have now, it's 3:50, so
okay.
Taking a minute, 10 minutes break, so at 4 or 15 minutes. So how about do you want Diego, do you have any?
Okay, 10 minutes is fine.
10 minutes is fine. Okay, then we have 10 minutes break, a coffee break, and we will be back.
Great.
Thank you, Professor, and we'll see you in 10 minutes.
In object of she had been object of direct threats against her life, and she wanted, or she felt safe if I accompany her just to the taxi in order to prevent any attack happening against her while she was just going out of the cafe to the taxi. And this is because you are a witness of things that happens to the organizations, communities, and people who you are researching, you are working with them or whatever. And yeah, your presence there as a privileged guy, in my case, a European in Mexico or in Colombia or in Palestine, this had an effect on how the perpetrators of violence behave in front of us, as a simple researchers. So yeah, these are things that we have to take into consideration in order to prevent harming people due to our research or due to their participation in our research. Well, do you have any questions related to this challenge? The challenge of self-protections and protections protecting others?
I have a comment actually.
Yeah.
I'm sorry because I don't have a camera here.
Don't worry.
Yes, when you said that sometimes it's good that you are foreigner, it depends where you are, because when you are a female and with a hijab and you want to do in a European place, city research, you are not very welcomed usually. So yes, you have to put it.
Can you introduce yourself? Can you introduce yourself because you just entered and
yes.
Introduce yourself. Maybe you can introduce yourself, your PhD research with Professor Diego.
Yes, my name is Shahira Fakher. I'm from Jaffa. Jaffa is a mixed city in Israel. And now I am in Vienna for 4 months. I prefer actually not to talk about my research now because it's I'm confused a little bit. Yes, but it's in general, I will talk about the influence of the war about the masculinity and yeah.
Okay.
Yes, I mean, you were completely right. This is the reason because I said that it's a very personal experience based in my case of a male, of course, and European. Of course, those things offer me some privileges in some context that for sure for you you don't. But probably in other contexts, being a woman, I'm also a woman. With the veil, covered with the veil, could offer you also some protection in other contexts.
Yes. Yes, it has advantages and disadvantages, and it depends where you are, of course.
Yeah.
Yes, when I am in the West Bank, I feel confident with my hijab. When I am in Batyam, I don't really feel confident with it. So yeah, you're right. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so that's the again, no, this is something that we need to reflect every time that we conduct this research in the field work. I mean, this field work for research, we need to adapt. We need to see where we are, and we need to assess the situation and how we are affecting that, and how this is going to affect us. And there is not a single recipe to avoid risk or to have more influence or to have more access to sources or whatever. It is something that we need to find in every case, in every particular case. Yeah, right.
Doctor? Just if I heard Shahira very well, she said her identity as being a Muslim with the veil or the scarf or whatever, as a researcher in the West. Is that what you said? I think that the question that have you ever tried to conduct research in the West? Because sometimes we have some prejudgment and so on that like are poisoned by this kind of prejudgment, but without even having experience in the West. I think that such questions doesn't exist because when you have the chance to conduct research in the West, that the kind of, I mean, your religious identity and so on, it's not that big deal. It's not a question because there is openness to different religious identities you can conduct, and then it's no problem. And they had the experience in that issue.
But still, there are a lot of people. I mean, it depends of the way and the people who you are contacting for your research. But I can say that probably in Spain, in the case of Spain, for instance, if you go to rural areas or to cities, most of the people are going to behave different in front of a woman than in front of a man. A little bit different, but more differently if you are wearing hijab. I mean, if you are wearing it, I can tell you that they are going to behave different, and they are going to incorporate into their perception of you a lot of prejudice that they don't even know that they have, but they still have. All this question of the Orientalism has created a lot of damage in the European societies, and still a lot of the popular culture reproduce many stereotypes and ideas about especially about the Arab world, but also about the Islam and Muslims, that it's going to affect in different extension. I mean, some people will be more reluctant to share information with you, or they will look at more suspicious about you. Others less, but yeah, it's going to have an impact. That's sure.
Yes, and Dr. Diego, I have also a comment that sometimes the impact is positive, but in both ways, it prevents people to be normal to you. They are all over respect you or over disrespect you. In general, I'm talking about
Shaira, you're breaking out. Maybe we keep to Zenat. Zenat, you can ask your question.
I don't
It's the same, it's the.
Shahira, you have internet.
experience in the West as in Israel, especially in general, a way that it is very, very over.
Okay.
Maybe my internet is not.
Yeah, we not hear you very well, but we will give to Zenat and then we'll come back to you if you have a question. Zenat, you can ask.
It's
Yeah, Zenat, go ahead. Can't hear you, you're muted.
Effectively, I wanted to respond to Abdelrazak, but Dr. Diego gave the right answer. And we all know about the Islamophobia and the rise of Islamophobia in the aftermath of Syrian refugees in 2015. And now I think it's more and more after the Ukrainian crisis and the Ukrainian refugees. So as a Muslim woman, I'm afraid to conduct any interview or focus group in Europe, especially in some countries, because I know the situation and the context, and the hatred feelings are still in the hearts and minds of these people. So Abdelrazak, your identity is not well clear to the people in Europe, and I know you are studying something about the culture and you get along well with the people there. I know this, but if I have hijab, is this the situation that I face? Same situation?
Yeah, to be
we
honest,
have to be
yeah.
reasonable, and it's not a kind of prejudice. And you said that,
No.
Shahira.
And that's why, you know. Yeah.
No, it's not prejudice. It's something real.
Yeah.
Let me say,
Yeah.
sorry, let me say something here. Well, probably it's not, I mean, it's not so open as you are saying. It's not something to be worried about in general terms. Most of the people in Europe are not going to be just, they are not openly Islamophobic, or they are not like that. But it is true that, for instance, if Abdelrazak goes to ask something to people, normal people in Spain, and then you, Sinat, go after him, he is going to be considered by most of the people as well, he is a researcher, he is a PhD student, whatever, while you that are occupying, let's say, the same position, you are going to be perceived as first is a woman, then why is she covering her head? Oh, of course, because she is less civilized. This is the idea. I mean, Islamophobia is not only the hate against the Islam, but it is more connected with prejudices that we have in or stereotypes. And the stereotypes that we have is that Muslims are not so civilized like the Europeans, let's say. So in that way, he is going to be considered a PhD student, and you are going to be considered, yes, a PhD student, but maybe you are not so bright like him, because you are, wearing the hijab. This is the way in which he's going to perform. In let's going to say that the legitimacy that they consider that you have as a researcher is being affected by the way that you are perceived by them.
The question would be, does it affect the researcher and his research? So first, it will affect you as a researcher personally, like you're profiling yourself, people profiling you in a different, wrong way, but would it affect the research itself? So would it make the research more biased, or maybe it will take the research on a different gap or different path? Like, okay, I cannot make the research in France. There's a lot of prejudice and Islamophobia. But yes, there is. But will it affect the research itself? This is the most important question. So usually the researcher will not have a very humbly happy environment to conduct the research. That's where we do call about reconciliation in the middle of conflict. That's what we are doing. So part of the prejudice and part of who we are and our profile, but this is what we are doing, and it's in the middle of conflict. So So I don't think any researcher will have a very environmental happy environment. I think all environments will be difficult. Like Professor Diego and his experience as well as my experience as well. I wanted to speak before about my experience that in Ben Gurion Airport, when I was doing my PhD, they took me into a room and started interrogating me for 1 hour, and then they discovered that I study at German university. And then they said, okay, you can go, but never tell the Germans we interrogated you. No, this never happened to you. Yeah, and we let you go. So I said, okay. And I left, but this is but did it affect my research? It did not affect my research. It affected me personally. So you have to like kind of switch between your personal unbiased way of feeling. Yes, it feels harsh, but it shouldn't affect your research. It should be, you should be still a researcher, scientist, that you see it in parallel ways and not see that what happens to you personally should affect the research. It's like, okay, there's like some French people are biased, like in Germany, there is Nazis. That does not mean all of Germans are Nazis. So, or like in France, there is Islamic phobia very high, or is it not? But that not mean that all the French people have Islamic phobia. So I know that it will affect the profile of a researcher, and it's very hard. And usually the environment of research, that's why you do research in that environment. It's not easy, and it will be difficult while you are doing it. And you might be hurt personally, but at the same time, you cannot say, well, I didn't do this research in France because there are Islamic phobia, for example. This is, I think, what Abdul Razak was saying. He was not prejudiced against, maybe, I don't know what exactly, but how much it will affect your research. This is what you can assist. So you can say, I cannot make this research anymore. This is a different story. This is, you can say, I cannot make this research because the research where I'm doing it are not accepting to answer questions. Let me do the research. But if they don't like you, it's simple. You don't have to be liked, for example. As a scientist, it's very difficult to be liked. This is part of the research concept that's happening.
So if I just may speak for a minute, I think, Zinat, what you were speaking about is you understand that, of course, you're going to go forward with your research, but your question was really, and tell me if I'm wrong here, that how do you prepare yourself for this situation? Prior to, I think it was in the Trust Matters section, Professor Diego was talking about position and identity, right? So you're speaking about these things, and I think it's really healthy and important for us to reflect upon who we are, how we're going to go into a situation, and also if we are terribly scared or there is risk, going back to the section that Professor Diego presented, consider the risk assessments. And of course, there's always going to be some type of difficulty and at times danger in the research that you go to, depends where you are. I've been in different parts of the world. I've been in Chiapas, Colombia, many different parts. And as a woman, it's also, I think, a different experience. But again, before going into any of the situations, I think research situations, I think it's really important to reflect on the questions that we heard today. One of them was Zinat's, which is true. In her case, I've never worn a veil, but I'm sure it becomes a scary situation. So how do you prepare your presence? And then going back again to the positive impact that Professor Diego spoke about, which is really important here. And I'm just going to deviate for a minute from what we were speaking about. But Professor Diego said, it's really important that we think that the research is going to have a positive impact, whether it's a policy paper, you said, whether it's in the collective, in the community. So at the end of the day, it's going to be difficult. We have to assess, we have to prepare ourselves, but it's just not only if you're a peace building practitioner. I've been a peace building practitioner for 15 years of my life and also a scholar, but as a peace building practitioner, you actually see the impact, right? So it's visible and it happens year after year. But when you're doing research, you should also be aware that you're going to have a positive impact, and it could be in the different formats that Professor Diego shared with us, policy papers, or leaving something for the community. But in all this process, each one of you will have a positive impact, but it's really important to always go back to this question. I think Zinat, Shahira, all of you were approaching from a different space, that you do need to make sure that you are ready to engage and, you know, reflect and honor that space that you have the fear. You have to have a risk assessment. You have to have a community or a network like Professor Diego shared with us. So there's a lot of things that you can do to prepare. And another thing I would suggest, like I said, I've never worn a veil, but I'm a woman and I've been in different situations. Colleagues, that's when you actually engage with colleagues, other researchers, to also not only share your fears, your plan, and what you think you can do to minimize the risk, but also to get advice on how do you move forward. So I think that's part of the value also of Armina, that we're all here as researchers, future colleagues, right? Some of us are in positions, others are doing their different research as we speak, but we're a space where these things can always be addressed. So that's what I wanted to share. Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody actually added something really important to this point, which we couldn't have just moved on, because I was thinking about it when at the beginning of the lecture about, well, how about gender? How about these situations? So thank you both Shahida and Zinat and everybody else who contributed to the conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Laura, for your valuable response, and even Dr. Diego. If I'm talking about Islamophobia, I don't mean that I cannot conduct research in Europe. And I said before my statement that in some countries in Europe, so the risk assessment is differs from country to country, from Israel and Palestine, then Europe, then Lebanon. So I know what I have to do. For me, I will choose the snowball sampling, and this is the best way to reach the informants in Europe. Otherwise, I cannot, because I don't expect what's the reaction of the people if I want to ask them to involve in my research. So snowball sampling is the best way to get access to these people. That's all, but I know it's very difficult, but we can do.
Thank you, Zinat.
Doctor.
Yes, Abdelrazak, maybe you can continue.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Laura, for raising the idea. I mean, of getting ready to indulge into research endeavor, and actually, I think it's not only protecting or not. We can think of it this way: it's not protecting the self, but it's empowering the self. I mean, being ready, being well empowered with tools, with competencies to well present yourself, because you need to read your audience before, and you are an audience for the other, and you need to know each other before in advance, because you are not going in to indulge into a situation, research situation, without knowing your respondents, your participants in the research. That's why it's you, the research, to kick away this kind of, let's say, prejudgment, because I'm Muslim or I'm Christian or I'm Jewish, I will face this problem because of my cultural or religious identity, because this will affect the researcher, will affect the objectivity of the researcher. They will not, let's say, conduct an objective research paper, but it will be based, because it will affect it affects, I mean, the mentality, it affects the research, it affects the finding and so on. Just respond as a response to Zinat, I get involved in research in which different religious groups, and they get I get them involved in my research, and there were no problem at all. And then at that time, I present myself, even a Muslim. I have never presented myself as a Muslim, because I always present myself as like complexity, Christian, Muslim, and so on, as Abrahamic. But at that time, I do it on purpose, as a Muslim, and I presented myself as a Muslim to Buddhists, to Hindu, to Jewish community in Europe, and that does not affect, I mean, my situation and their situation. So it's all depend on how you empower yourself to indulge into a kind of research situation and so on. And religious identity had nothing to do with, I mean, it's not a problem. I mean, thank you so much.
Thank you, Abdul Ghani. Thank you very much for the
I
contribution.
want to ask Abdul Razak, can you go to Israel and conduct research there without feeling fear or planning before? Because we know the situation. Can you? You know the situation. And we know as Muslim with hijab, the situation in Europe.
But
So-
you have a lot of Israelis, for example. Yeah.
Concerns. And we have to think properly how to conduct the research in Europe. So that's why we have many elements can increase the concerns in our mindset. One of them is
And
the
it's not
Islam,
like, I'm gonna tell you again. Yeah, Zinat.
the identity. You
that-
don't wear
Zinat, just like-
hijab. I wear hijab.
There are people wearing the hijab in the Jewish community in Israel, like the from Contratado, they are wearing hijab. And I'm gonna tell you, just like your finger, your look at your hand. Your fingers are not the same. And we cannot like having a cookie cutter, one size fits all. Because you remember Noah, she's Israeli, and has nothing. You remember Noah? Noah. I think we had her in one of the seminars. So we cannot, let's say, a cookie cutter. I mean, one size fits all, like projection. One, if I mean, I don't know how to say it, but we cannot project one situation to another situation. There is always a way to deal with the situations.
Abdirazak, I don't know if you have really the right to tell somebody who feels in a way, not to feel in a way to be scared or to be unconfident. You are a man. You are without the hijab. Maybe you don't feel this size, and you don't feel how people treat you or how people look at you. Me, personally, I live in Jaffa, as I told you, in a mixed city between Israelis and Palestinians. I know what is racism is. I know how they look at you when you are as if they are disgust from you. You can hear, you can feel it, you can know. And yes, but we are, I think that I'm sure that we are really strong. We can do it. We are in Europe, we can do the research, but we have to deal with it. We have to deal with this issue also.
Thank you.
I'm gonna tell you one thing. I have my colleagues that conducted research. I mean, regarding the religious issues, and then all the time that they have problems when it comes to the way they presented themselves. They present themselves as a Muslim. They will correct. I mean, the Christian or the Jewish and so on. So if you have this idea in mind, how you're gonna guarantee that? I mean, your audience, your respondents will respond well to you. So that's the idea. That's the issue. Sometimes as a researcher, we cannot put away, I mean, our identities. It's not this forever, but temporary, you know, and just like avoiding being biased, prejudiced, being objective. Just like you don't start from your cultural or religious background to view the other, but you have to build a consensus. I'm not here, for example, and then one of the anecdotes is that one of my colleagues went there to a certain religious community, and then they started like presenting Islam and talking about Islam as the right things to do, to believe in. And that's the problem. That's what make the problem. That's what may aggravate, I mean, the issue of conducting a research.
Okay.
So if you have this, yeah.
There's that. So now we have Abdul Ghani. Maybe he would like to contribute a bit about what. Yes, Abdul Ghani, you can speak. And Shahira, please raise up your hand when you want to speak. So we
Yeah.
can.
Okay, sorry.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Yes, I think it's a relative situation. Yes, concerning some special identities, especially Islam and Islamophobia. This exposes women to such situations, and even men, by the way, not only women, but the risk for women is very high, is higher. And I'd like just to remind you with the case of I think it's Dalia Sherbini or Dina Sherbini, doctor. She was in Germany, and she was killed by. She was Egyptian. She was killed by. She was killed because she was wearing the hijab. Okay, and so it's not only academic. It's maybe in different reasons, and it's not only in Europe. Even it may be in our countries, in home countries. That's what I just want to add.
Thank you, Abdelghani. I would like also to reflect a bit about Professor Diego, what he said in his about risk assessment is very important. So risk assessment, you should do a risk assessment. You cannot go do a research in a, like I cannot do research for one of the cities in Germany about Gira, because Gira has many Nazis. If you want to go live there, the Nazis will not rent you a house, whether you like it or not. So risk assessment is very important to do. And as he said, it is levels. And you have general analysis you have to do, see the big picture. You have to do what I think is very important, situation analysis of it. You're a scientist. You can go into an emotional way of thinking, but if you go emotional way of thinking, you might become a politician or a politics, or as Abdelghani said as well, what happened in Egypt also happened in Germany. Germany is in Europe. What happened to the Italian guy in Egypt? They killed him because he was a researcher from Cambridge. They thought he's a spy. So this, in an interrogation, he lost his life. And this is also a problem. So you need to do situation analysis for yourself, where you are going and what would happen. And you have to gather more and manage information, as was said before by Professor Diego, and you have to assess the actors, behaviors, and perceptions, and your goals of what and the dynamics of the situation where you are in. So you cannot go like for radicals and tell them, yeah, I want to research you, or you go to the middle of conflict. Some stuff will happen in the future, but what you need to do is one of the good thing in research you have to do to cover the risks and see what risks you have and how much harm, body harm might have. Some of the ethical consideration in developing a research is called the body harm law. The body harm law, it states like how much harm it would affect you personally and how much harm you would affect the people doing research on and the environment. So if I'm doing a research that will affect and harm people, the research will be not conducted, it will be canceled. So as much as you are doing harm to the people, you also have to check about your own harm. And this is a very important issue. Yeah, I think, Professor Diego, are you still with us?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you think that you can, we don't have only much time, so maybe Professor Diego can reflect on what you said.
Let me say here something. Sorry, Zinat. I think that both things are, I mean, they have impact in the research. For sure, the perception that the researcher has over the subject of study or over his or her informants. I mean, the way that you perceive them is going to affect the way that you treat them or how you are going to raise the questions or whatever. But in the other side, I mean, on the contrary, also the perception that your informant the informant has over you is going to also to affect the answers or the testimonies that they are going to give you. That's for sure. So perceptions works in both ways. One is that yes, the perception that the researcher brings with himself or herself to the field is going to affect, but also how is he or she perceived by the informants is going to affect also the research, and we have to take that into account. Well, it is something that is going to happen, and we have to consider it. We have to try to minimize the impact in the research and so on. But I think that it works both ways in every context.
Now, Professor Diego, do you need more time to continue? We can add more time because we started very late.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind to stay 15-20 minutes more. I have still a couple of slides that I want to share with you.
Okay, then we will add another 20 minutes after 5, so to continuation of Professor Diego. The one thing I would like to reflect in ethical consideration of conducting research, it's called human harm. And this human harm is part of the risk assessment. And when you do it, you have to human harm of the people that you are doing the research on and the human harm of your own self. This is how I wanted to add.
Okay, you are advancing one of the slides.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
It's fine. It's fine. Don't worry. I wanted to talk about that. So.
I'm sorry. It's, yeah.
So I have two more issues to deal with. One is the issue of mental health, and also the next issue is the ethics. Okay. So first, something that we have also to keep in mind when we do research on stressful situations, in stressful contexts, and for sure in conflict areas. One is that direct violence have a deep effect on the researchers. Even if you are, I mean, it doesn't mind if you just listen others to tell you how they experiment that violence in their bodies or in their bodies of their families, relatives, or whatever, or colleagues. Or even if, I mean, it's even worse if you are witnessing that direct violence happening against someone in front of you, or something like that, or you are just having the testimony of someone who has suffered that violence. This is going to affect you because we are human, we have empathy, and this is going to affect us. It doesn't matter if it happens over the people, but this violence can happen also over the territory, the environment. These kind of things are going to affect us, and we have to be ready to understand that we could feel bad when we listen or we witness this kind of things. But this is something for, at least according to my experience, for which or universities don't prepare us enough. We are not training in how to deal with this kind of traumas that could affect us while we are doing our research. It is, I mean, it should not, we could have not major issues. It could be just some stress, we could have fear, we could have nightmares after listening many stories on how people have been tortured in the jail, or how they have seen how their relatives have been killed by a paramilitary group or by whatever. So this may affect you, and also these kind of things are eroding your mental health, are eroding also your work, because your mind is in difficulties. So it's going to affect also your research, because it affects the way that you rest. It's also limiting the way as you move there, because when you start to share this fear because of all the stories that they are telling you, things that are happening in the territory where you are moving, you can also share that fear about that violence happening around, and you could limit yourself, your movement, even if there is no a direct threat against you, or that experience is not real at that moment. But it is going to affect you. I remember once in Colombia, I was in Barranca Bermeja, in one city very affected by paramilitary violence in Colombia. And after conducting like 20 interviews with women, journalists, human rights defenders, lawyers, unionists, I really try not to go outside of the hotel in the night, because they have told me so many stories about how violence had happened in the city in the previous years, that even if that violence was not so severe at that time, I limit myself the movement in the city. I had kind of fear to go outside in the evening, because of these people in the motorbikes could be just doing things, and you even feel this. I remember in another occasion in Mexico, we were just waiting to go to a bus, but at that time something happened. There was a kind of probably a car or a bus or a truck who made a very big noise, and it sounds like an explosion. And I remember that myself and two other colleagues just in the over the floor, and the rest of the people just they were stunned. And that was because we have been listening so many stories of violence, that when we listened that the big noise, we were so scary that it's affected us. this kind of stories, the trauma of the others, the violence that we saw in some parts of the country, this erode or health, this and gave us a lot of stress, and yeah, it's going to affect your research. So we have to be aware of these things happen. We have to understand that this is something normal. We are humans and affected by the suffering of others, and also yeah, we need to try to deal with it, trying to rest, trying to talk and to share the stories with others, and also at some point it could be also a fuel for more committing in your research, because you are seeing that this research is needed, it could be meaningful, and you want to give them voice to the people who have been sharing these stories with you, and so on. So yeah, everybody has to find ways to deal with these issues, because at some point it could block you, it could prevent you to continue your research in the field when you are listening so many or so much suffering.
And in Vienna, they have a psychology section for people who are doing their PhD.
Wow.
Yeah, and talk with psychologists about their work and what is stress. They have a department for it. They did that in Vienna until today for PhD students.
That is great.
Mentally ill because of what they're doing, or going to research places that have conflict. They come back very. One of the students I know, she was in the riots between Israelis and Palestinians. She's German, and she had a bad effect because of the bombing in Metzahur, what that happened. And now she runs when she hears any voice, she runs away. So she got the feeling, and now she's getting some psychology therapy about it. And she told me that living in Metzahur for 2 years did that effect on her. So now, like the section of this in Vienna University, they're doing it. Yeah, so.
Yeah, it's a good service.
Yeah.
And in my university, for instance, in Granada, we don't have such a service, and I think that it is really important to support the researchers in the university. Yeah, and probably in the future we will have more opportunities to increase this service for researchers, because yeah, we can notice everybody who has conducted the research in under stressful conditions. Yeah, it knows how these situations erode your health. So it's important to care. And finally, and I will take the last questions if you want, just some brief comments on the ethical issues. One is that yeah, we need to consider also how our research affects the others. This is something important that we have to take into account. For me, it's the most important ethical issue involved here, because what I want to do is trying to add extra harm or damage in any way to the people who are going to be working with me or are going to be affected by my research. So I also want to avoid any extractivism. So I don't want to use the individuals and the communities for my own purposes. I want to make them participate into my research in order to bring them something to them. At least it should be one of the purposes of my research. And also being conscious, we have mentioned already this, being conscious of our position as researchers. Everybody from his own or her own position, being the male, woman, Muslim, Christian, whatever, and also the opportunities and the situation that this kind of things bring us when we are conducting the research. So some of these features or own features are going to give us privileges or are going to close doors to us, or is going to affect the position of the others, or is going to affect our vision of the subject of the study, or even the participants in the study. So yeah, we have to be aware of that, and that is an important thing. I don't think that we can do objective research. For me, that is not possible, but we can for sure do scientific research located in a particular space, and we can be honest, showing where we are, who we are, how we are conducting this research, and in that way we are not playing against anybody, or we are not playing anybody. We are being honest with our research, and of course from the position that where I conduct my research, which is inside of the peace research areas, peace studies. For me, it's clear that any single piece of research has to try to have a social impact. We want, or we should think in how to transform our society, how to create more spaces, more just, more equal, more or less segregated, and more peaceful at the end, thanks to our research. And this is something that not all the research that is done has this purpose, but at least the research done from peace studies should incorporate this goal into their research. So yeah, these were the last two issues that I wanted at least briefly to discuss with you, and I open now here for questions on these two later challenges, or to any other things that you still want to discuss. We could stay a little bit more, don't worry.
Professor Diego, I'd just like to say, first of all, thank you for your excellent lecture, and two comments. The first one is a question. Is there any way that we can get a copy of your presentation today? I would really like every single student in Armenia to have a copy of this.
Yeah, I will share it with you. Yes.
Great. And when they're going through the process, now that everybody's here, please, if there's questions on anything that Professor Diego presented on any of these steps, it was 6 up to 6, please contact Ayad or myself. You know, we're open and we're here in order to be able to address any of the questions that we've addressed here, or others that you might have when you review Professor Diego's lecture. That's one. So again, thank you, Professor Diego. I think what you presented today is very valuable. It's important for everybody to understand the process. That's one. And two, I really appreciate the fact that you reiterated twice that the research should have social impact. It should have a way to transform. I'm director of practice, and part of it is theory to practice. You know, how do you do the peace building and reconciliation process in the world? How do you transform conflicts? But it's just not about being a peace builder 100% of the time and being out in the world that you can transform spaces. It's your research that has the power to transform these spaces. So it's just really important, I think, for me, and I think for Ayad and everybody here, especially the students doing their research, to hear this and to understand the value of the work and the goal, where they're going. So thank you so much, Professor Diego.
Thank you.
So I would like to reflect on the ethical consideration, because I worked on this several times. One of my research was that when the Palestinian students went to Auschwitz trip, they said a lot of comments that are in my book, but it was forbidden to publish it, even that I had the consent of the NGO that I was representing to publish everything, and also the students themselves, they signed on a consent document that the picture and it will be also seen in the book and the research. What was done at the end is that we canceled the names. So you can see what they talked about, but you cannot see who talked about it, or what's his name, or what his picture, or anything. So this was hidden from, and this is part of what we call the ethical consent in research. So the consent, you must have a consent from the person that you're doing research, but if you're doing like, in my research, it was 70,000 people who are in the Facebook page, and it was about how they developed some group, 40 students who went to Auschwitz, and what they developed between each other and what they posted on the Facebook page. and the interaction of other people on the Facebook page about the Holocaust. So you cannot even take these people and put their names in your research as they are, and that was a big problem. And if I don't put that, what they discussed is like I did not do my research. So what I did is cancel the name, just cancel the names, cut that off, and just say Palestinian said this, Israeli said this. Like, for example, if you're making it in locations, and this is how it became that, like some of my research was whether they would like the Jordanian to come and cover up the Fatah government or Hamas government and rule instead of what is happening in the PA. So 80% of Gaza wants the King of Jordan to rule, and 70% of West Bank wants Fatah to rule. So that was the different situations between both, but you cannot ever say the names of people that you are working with or you're doing research on, unless they tell you yes and you have a signed paper document with them. So when I published my research, they wanted a signed document from the NGO that I was representing in Palestine. And I went and they signed it and they had the stamp for all the data that I'm taking. It's from their Facebook page, from their database. Even that, after that, we had to cancel all the names of all the students. And you can see it in my book. You can see there's no student's name. And the pictures are not really good pictures that are there because of the situation. We made the faces blurry. Even that all of the people that are inside the picture signed on the consent of photo. So this is ethical consideration is very important. It has very big aspect in the research, and you must consider it in your research. When you do your research, even after you finish your PhD research, they will ask you about it. So start it with now, what is the ethical consideration in conducting your research? Because it's very important. And if you do any wrong stuff, your research might be canceled, even that you spent 3-5 years ago. One of the research that might have been canceled in my research is that someone got harmed. And if they prove that they got harmed, your PhD is canceled. And this is just, I wanted to reflect on that. So this is part of it.
In my case, I also had to erase the name of the informants. I conducted for my PhD more than 100 interviews. Many people were, people affected by different kind of violence, human rights defenders, different types. And I could name some of the people that were like part of the authorities in different places or international NGOs, these kind of things. But local population from communities or organizations, in some cases I had the consent to do it, but for security reasons in this case, we try to avoid to name them. But then I create a system for code them, and I said interview to number 1. This is someone from an NGO organization, and it was quoted like that in the dissertation. So there are systems to provide some information about who are the people who answered those questions or made those statements, without to reveal their real names and ubication and those things. But it is something to take into consideration and to take care of that. And but also in that sense, I remember that, well, it is a practice that I always do when I move and cross the border between in this conflict areas. When I visit Mexico, Colombia, or Palestine, still nowadays, I try to avoid bringing with me in my laptop the data with me. I try to send it before, or I try to encode the informants, the name of the informants, and the testimonies inside. Also, my telephone is also all the contacts in my telephone, all the local contacts are changed the names and are encoded in order to avoid or make difficult. Probably I'm not avoiding anything, but at least I'm making difficult the surveillance process and trying to reduce the risk that my colleagues or my contacts are having in different places. Well, any other comment or question?
Yes, I would like to add something. Considering the code of conduct and the ethics, if you want to make interviews, you have to record the interviews, and even that you want to erase the names or the people who participate, and then you can make transcription for those interviews in order if your supervisors want to examine if you really have met the people or not. So this is important point in conducting the interviews.
Yes, sometimes you are going to face also the situation where your informants don't want that you record that meeting or that interview. They want to give you the testimony, but they are afraid of the use of that recording, or they are just not used to talk in front of a recorder. So, I mean, there are ways also to validate that information. Okay, you can also include it in your PhD with the, if you have taken notes of the conversation and you are saying that for this or that reason you couldn't record that, and because you are doing the research in under special conditions, so you cannot conduct the research like if you were doing it in other parts of a normal situation where you are doing a regular interview. So it is important to record as much as you can, but if you cannot record everything, well, doesn't matter. Just take note on that, and then you will find a way to do it in agreement with your supervisor, I'm sure.
Thank you very much. Abdelghani has a question.
No, it's not a question, but I'd like to add that if you would like to record it, I think we should have a written consent from the participants in order to be, you know, and I think we may ask the people who refuse to give such written consent to give a written refusal, maybe for maybe for the supervisors, but it's their own right ethically to approve it or to refuse it. So written consents will be more effective. Thank you, Professor, for such information.
It's not more, it's the ethical written consent is obligatory.
Mhm.
So that makes sure when you are, before you start your research, you have risk assessment, you have ethical consideration, these stuff, and you have the problems as Professor Diego situated in his proposal or PowerPoint. It is very important. You cannot just write your proposal and start to research without thinking of all of this before you conduct it. Otherwise, after you finish your research, you want to do ethical consideration, you cannot. We have a 500 book or 270 book, and you have a lot of people names inside that you conducted and you worked with. You need to go look for them, and or else your research is done. This will be asked of you in the committee.
Mhm.
It will be one of the questions. So you start with these things at the beginning, and don't think, yes, I will do it later. Doesn't work that way. Then it will follow it up in the future. No, that's what I wanted to add actually on this. Any other questions or comments for Professor Diego? So I think, Professor, we are at the end of our session. I would like to say thank you so much for everyone. We actually published our new book. You can just share with
marketing time.
For my book.
The marketing moment.
Marketing moment for Armina. Actually, this book, you can take it. I will send it to you. We have a free PDF. I can give it to you free PDF, because we are really, it has many 28 chapters of these 28 professors in the field of reconciliation. And you can also really benefit from it, because it's also have the theories of Armenian insight that you must conduct in your research, like the applied forensics for reconciliation and peace studies are in this book, published at the beginning of the chapter. Because this is what we implement in Armenia. And the others are professors from the Middle East and North Africa, and also from England and Europe. We also we will have another book. What we're working on is reconciliation, conflict resolution, peace studies, where Professor Diego will be part of it as well. This is also Professor Diego. You are part of this. You have I wrote about you. You are also in. So don't worry. It's not easy to run away from us. So here is it. So you can take this book. I'll send it to all of you. You have to send an email email, and I will send you back with an ebook with a whole. And we have also the reconciliation and refugees book. I also can send you that as well. And you have the internet communication technology of reconciliation. There's like chapters there that will help you in developing your research. Chapter 2, the methodology. This will be like in the future aspect, how we're gonna teach you how to conduct applied forensics for conflict transformation and reconciliation and peace studies. This is the part of the philosophy that Armina will adopt. Armina is adopting this philosophy. Applied forensics for reconciliation, conflict transformation, and peace studies. So it's a kind of how you develop from theory into practice, and this is what we'll teach you within the discourse of this sessions. Now, thank you so much, Diego. I just took the end to show them our new success. It just arrived. So I'm happy about it.
So thank you very much for the invitation to be here. It was my pleasure really to share with you these thoughts and discuss on these issues. It was very interesting for me, and yeah, I will keep reflecting on that because I want to write something on these issues, and this chat was very, very positive and insightful for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for a good session. Thank you. We'll see you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a nice